The drums beat loudly across the land as the people gathered, their faces shining with excitement. King Oba stood at the front, a smile of pride across his face as he addressed his people. His voice rang clear and strong. "Look at what we've built together. This kingdom is mighty, and it is because of my strength, my rule, that we have prospered. There is no one who can challenge us, no one who can take what is mine." The crowd erupted in cheers, their loyalty to their king unwavering. The music played, the dancers danced, and the kingdom celebrated its strength and prosperity, certain that nothing could ever tear them apart. But then, the music faltered. A figure stepped forward from the shadows, her presence sharp and powerful. Without saying a word, she walked into the center of the gathering, her eyes locked on the king. The crowd fell silent, their eyes drawn to her. A heavy tension filled the air, and whispers spread like wildfire through the kingdom. The king froze. His smile faded. He had not expected this. "You stand here speaking of strength," the woman's voice rang clear, cutting through the silence. "But your strength is built on lies and deceit, King Oba." The words hit like thunder, causing gasps to ripple through the crowd. The people, once so loyal, began to murmur, confusion growing among them. Had they been deceived all this time? King Oba's face reddened with anger, his fists clenching. "What is this madness?" he shouted. "How dare you speak such lies? In front of me?" But the woman continued, her voice unwavering. "This kingdom was built on broken promises, on betrayal," she said. "You've taken what is not yours, and the truth will be known." The people, stunned, looked to one another. Doubt began to take root in their hearts. How could this be? Could the king really have built his rule on such a foundation? The woman stepped forward, and with a voice filled with certainty, she revealed what no one had dared to speak. "I am the true heir to the throne. It was my bloodline that should have ruled this land. For years, you have been deceived by a false king. But no longer. Now, I will take what is rightfully mine." The crowd gasped. Shock rippled through them as they tried to understand the weight of her words. The king's bloodline was not the one destined for the throne? The truth seemed impossible to believe, but there was no denying the force in the woman's words. King Oba, his fury rising, stepped forward. His voice thundered through the gathering. "You are nothing but a thief," he shouted. "This kingdom is mine, and no one, especially you, will take it from me." His eyes burned with rage as he motioned to his guards, rallying them to defend him. But even as he spoke, doubt began to creep into the eyes of his loyal followers. The once powerful king now looked like a man on the edge of losing everything. Tension filled the air as Oba's guards stepped forward, weapons drawn. Yet some of the people, once loyal to the king, turned to the woman. "Is what she says true?" they whispered. "Could we have been deceived all this time?" The kingdom, once unified under Oba's rule, now stood divided. Loyalties shifted in the blink of an eye, and the flames of rebellion sparked in the hearts of those who had suffered under Oba's reign. The woman's challenge had ignited a fire, and the people began to wonder where their true loyalty lay. The woman stood tall, unshaken by the king's words or the tense atmosphere. "Your reign ends today," she declared, her voice strong, with the weight of truth. The people will no longer follow a false king. The air seemed to crackle with the energy of change. What had once been a grand celebration now felt like the beginning of a battle. The people waited, unsure of what would come next. The kingdom stood on the edge of a great turning point, and nothing would ever be the same again. The stage was set. The kingdom was about to face a new reality. The future was uncertain, and the battle for the throne had only just begun. King Oba strode through the kingdom, his back straight and his eyes piercing. Every step he took exuded authority, and the people, though silent, could feel the weight of his presence. "I am the strength of this kingdom," he often said, his voice booming in the halls of his palace. The advisors around him nodded in agreement, knowing that his word was law. There was no one who could challenge him, no force strong enough to take what he had built. He ruled with an iron grip, unyielding and resolute. Yet beneath this confidence, there were sacrifices that few saw. To maintain his power, Oba had betrayed old friends, severed alliances, and broken promises that had once been sacred. "The weak must fall for the strong to rise," he told anyone who dared question his methods. His heart had hardened over the years, and nothing, he believed, was too high a price to pay for power. The kingdom was his, and he would stop at nothing to keep it. But there was one who had watched it all, the loyal advisor. Eve had served him faithfully in the beginning, guiding him through decisions and standing by his side. She had been proud of him when his power grew, and when his name became known far and wide. She had felt honor in her service. But over time, something had changed. Eve saw the cruelty that had come with the king's rule, the betrayals and lies, the people who had suffered. "There is no honor in this," she whispered to herself one night, the weight of her realization sinking deep into her chest. Still, she said nothing. She remained silent, the growing frustration simmering beneath her calm exterior. Then, one night, a secret came to light. Ife, alone in her chambers, uncovered something that shook her to her core. She was of royal blood, a descendant of the late king, the one Oba had replaced with deceit and bloodshed. Her birthright had been stolen, hidden away, and the truth of it burned in her heart. The throne that Oba sat on, her throne, had never truly belonged to him. This revelation set a fire inside her, a fire that could not be quenched. She knew the time had come for change. A shadow appeared before her, a figure cloaked in mystery, the seer. "The throne that glows brightest will cast the darkest shadows," he said, his words cryptic, yet heavy with meaning. Eve listened closely, understanding that Oba's rule had been built on corruption, and that it was only a matter of time before it all crumbled. The seer's words rang true, and Eve knew what she had to do. She could not let the kingdom continue down this path of darkness. As whispers of Oba's betrayals spread, Ife began to gather those who were tired of the king's cruelty, trusted generals, warriors, and even the common people who had suffered under Oba's heavy hand. All began to rally behind her cause. "We need a ruler who listens to the people, not one who uses them for power," they said, pledging their loyalty to Ife. She knew she could not do this alone. She needed their support, and they were ready to give it. The kingdom, once prosperous, now bore the weight of Oba's harsh rule. The taxes had risen, promises remained unfulfilled, and the soldiers grew weary of obeying his every command. "There are whispers of rebellion," one of Oba's advisors warned. But the king dismissed the warning with a scoff. He was too confident, too sure of his power to see the cracks that had begun to form. The people were restless, and soon, Ife's quiet rebellion would turn into a force that no one could ignore. In the dark of night, Ife gathered her allies, their faces grim but resolute. "We can no longer stay silent," she declared. "Oba must fall for this kingdom to thrive again." She shared her plan with them, the truth of her bloodline, her right to the throne. The time had come for her to take what was rightfully hers. There would be no turning back now. As rumors of Ife's growing influence reached Oba, he began to feel the first stirrings of doubt. He watched his advisors carefully, his gaze sharp, as if he could see through them. "Who is loyal to me?" he demanded, his voice low with suspicion. His confidence, once unshakable, now showed signs of cracking. The whispers of rebellion became harder to ignore. The once unchallenged king was now facing something he had never anticipated, his own weakening grip on power, and so the kingdom stood on the edge, the calm before the storm. If's quiet rebellion had taken root, and though Oba felt secure, in his throne he could sense the winds of change blowing. The people had begun to notice the cracks in his rule. His lies, his broken promises, and his manipulation could no longer be hidden. The time was coming, and Ife knew that the final confrontation was inevitable. The kingdom, divided, prepared for the battle that would decide its future, Ife stood before the council, her presence commanding silence. "The truth must be known," she declared, her voice steady and powerful. She reached for the evidence, holding it high for all to see. "King Oba has deceived us all. He has manipulated the kingdom, taken what is not his, and betrayed those who trusted him." A heavy silence filled the room, the weight of her words sinking in. The council members exchanged glances, their faces filled with doubt. The truth was out, and the tension in the air grew thick. King Oba, his face twisted with fury, leaped to his feet. "Lies! All lies!" he roared. His voice echoed through the room, shaking the walls. "She seeks only to divide us. She wants to destroy all that we have built." His words, though loud, lacked the strength they once held. The advisors, who had once hung on his every word, now looked uncertain, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The murmur of doubt began to grow, a quiet storm stirring in the hearts of those who had once pledged loyalty to him. Desperate, Oba turned to his loyal followers. "I have led this kingdom to greatness," he shouted, trying to rally his supporters. "I will not be overthrown by lies and treachery. We are strong. I am the king, and no one will take what is mine." But his words fell flat. The cracks in his reign were too obvious to ignore. "He has broken too many promises," one elder whispered, his voice barely audible but filled with the sting of truth. "His promises mean nothing anymore." Oba's attempts to rally the room only pushed his supporters further away, and the balance of power began to tip. Ife, ever watchful, quietly moved behind the scenes. She spoke to trusted generals and allies, each action calculated. "We will take control of the barracks," she instructed, her eyes sharp with determination. "The royal treasury must be secured. We cannot let Oba use what he has stolen to fight back." She moved swiftly, ensuring that the resources of the kingdom would no longer be at Oba's disposal. With each step, her influence grew stronger and her resolve hardened. The king's hold on the kingdom was slipping, and she was prepared to strike. As Ife's position strengthened, she uncovered more of the king's dark past. The secrets of his rise to power, betrayal, bloodshed, and murder were laid bare. "His rule was always based on bloodshed," she told her supporters. "He betrayed his own bloodline to seize the throne, and now it is time for him to face the consequences." The truth spread like wildfire, the people slowly awakening to the horror of their king's actions. Oba had ruled with lies, and now those lies were being exposed. The kingdom began to fracture. "Is it true?" whispered one of Oba's former allies, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Did he really kill his own?" The doubts that had been planted began to bloom, and the people's loyalty wavered. Those who had once stood by Oba now questioned his rule. Ife's supporters grew stronger, and the power of the king seemed to wane with every passing moment. The once unshakable ruler now faced the full weight of his actions. The military, once a pillar of Oba's strength, began to shift. Many of his closest advisors defected, their loyalty crumbling under the weight of the truth. "I have followed him for years," one general confessed, "but I cannot follow a man who murders his own blood." Ife's forces swelled as the tide turned in her favor. The people, once divided, now stood united behind her. Oba's reign was unraveling, and there was no way to stop it. In his desperation, Oba summoned his remaining loyalists. "We will crush them," he shouted, his voice strained with fear. "I will remain king. No one will take my throne." But the strength in his words was gone. His past had caught up with him, and his kingdom no longer feared him. The soldiers, once proud and loyal, now stood unsure, the whispers of rebellion growing louder with each passing day. The kingdom teetered on the edge of war. Whispers of rebellion echoed through the streets. "We need a new leader, one who will bring justice to this land," a group of citizens declared. "Ife is the true ruler." But even as more people began to rally behind Ife, there were still those who refused to accept the truth of Oba's treachery. "Oba is our king," they insisted. "He will fight to the end to keep his throne." The kingdom was now divided. Two sides prepared for the coming battle, each one determined to claim victory. "This will decide who truly rules," one of Ife's generals declared, his voice firm with resolve. "We fight not just for the throne, but for justice." The air crackled with anticipation as both sides readied for the final confrontation. Loyalty, power, and truth stood at the heart of the fight, and the future of the kingdom hung in the balance. The time for words had passed. Now it was time for action. King Oba stood tall, his chest puffed out with pride, his eyes burning with the fire of defiance. "You cannot defeat me!" he roared, his voice filled with fury. The words echoed through the air like a thunderclap, challenging anyone who dared to oppose him. Ife, calm and unwavering, stepped forward, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "The throne is not yours to keep," she replied, each word cutting through the tension like a sharp blade. The battle for the kingdom had moved beyond power. It had become personal. "You built your rule on lies, Oba," Ife continued, her voice steady, full of resolve. "And now the truth will end it." The king snarled, his face twisted in rage. "I am the rightful king," he spat. "You are nothing but a pretender. A thief who dares challenge me." His words were venomous, but Ife's resolve did not falter. The air between them thickened, each word from both leaders sharper than any sword. In the midst of their verbal clash, Ife struck a final blow. "The crown you wear was never meant for you," she declared. "It belongs to me. I am the true daughter of the late king, and you stole my birthright." The crowd gasped in shock. Their eyes darted between the two rulers. The truth had been laid bare. The king's once unchallenged rule had been based on nothing but deceit. Loyalty, which had once been so firm, now wavered as the people questioned the very foundation of Oba's reign. King Oba's face turned a deep shade of red, the blood rushing to his head. His hands clenched into fists, and fury boiled inside him. "Lies, treachery," he roared. "You will not take my throne." He raised his hand, ready to strike, but the guards that had once followed him stood still, their eyes now filled with doubt. Effie stood firm, her voice calm but full of strength. "It is you who will fall today, Oba," she said, each word a statement of undeniable truth. Oba, desperate to maintain control, lunged forward with all his might, aiming to silence Ife's rebellion once and for all. But Ife was prepared. With a quick signal, her allies surged from the shadows, surrounding the king's forces with precision and speed. "You cannot defeat me with brute strength alone," Ife warned. Her supporters, strong and loyal, cut through Oba's ranks like a sharp blade through cloth. The tide of the battle shifted, and the balance of power began to swing in her favor. Oba's soldiers, who had once fought with all their strength, began to falter. "It's over," one of his generals murmured, his voice low and filled with defeat. His sword lowered, and the realization that their king's rule had come to an end began to sink in. The people, who had once stood by Oba in fear and loyalty, now turned to Ife. "The true ruler is here," they shouted, their voices rising in unison. Ife's name spread through the crowd, growing louder as the people's faith shifted in her favor. More and more of Oba's supporters turned their backs on him, their eyes now seeing the truth of Ife's words. "We've been blind," an elder said, stepping forward. "Ife is the true heir, not Oba." The people, once afraid of the king's wrath, now found the courage to stand with Ife. Her leadership, her truth, shone through the chaos of the Eeyore. Battle, Oba, seeing his forces crumbling, his empire slipping away, made one final, desperate attempt to regain control. "I will not be cast aside," he screamed, rallying his last loyalists. But the people had already spoken. His time had passed. As the crowd surged forward, Oba turned, his back to the throne he had once believed was his forever. He fled, defeated, his empire crumbling behind. Him! The kingdom erupted into cheers as the man who had ruled through lies and fear was cast aside. "Long live Queen Ife!" the people cried, their voices filled with joy and relief. Ife, standing tall, stepped forward, her hand reaching for the crown that symbolized the true power of the kingdom. The throne, once held by a man who betrayed his people, was now in the hands of the rightful ruler. The kingdom, no longer divided, united under Ife's reign. With Oba gone, Ife took her rightful place on the throne. The weight of leadership now truly belonged to her. "We will rebuild," she promised her people, her voice carrying the promise of a brighter future. No longer ruled by lies and betrayal, the kingdom would now be a land of justice and hope. A kingdom where the people's voices would be heard and their needs would be met. Under her reign, the kingdom would rise again, stronger than ever before. The people erupted in joy as Ife took her place, standing tall before them. Her eyes were full of determination, the weight of the crown now resting upon her brow. "The kingdom is reborn today," she declared, her voice strong and unwavering. The crowd roared, their loyalty now firmly with her. "Long live Queen Ife!" they chanted, their hearts swelling with pride as the kingdom found new hope under her leadership. Without hesitation, Ife turned to the people, her resolve clear. "I will not allow this kingdom to suffer any longer. Under my rule, no one will be left behind," she promised. Her voice rang out with authority, echoing through the hearts of the people. "Justice and fairness will reign here, and the days of tyranny are over." The people listened closely, their hopes rising. For the first time in many years, they believed that true change had come. Ife wasted no time in setting things right. She ordered the dismantling of the harsh laws that Oba had imposed on the people. "Let there be fairness for every citizen," she instructed, her words like a balm to the wounds of the land. She replaced corrupt officials with those who had true loyalty to the people. "This land will thrive on honesty, not deceit," she proclaimed. The people knew that their kingdom had turned a corner. Under Ife, things would be different. Far from the palace, Oba wandered the roads, alone and broken. The once proud king, who had commanded respect and fear, now found himself powerless. "What have I become?" he muttered to himself, looking back at the kingdom he once ruled. No one greeted him now. His loyal subjects had turned their backs on him, leaving him to wander aimlessly, forgotten and cast aside. His reign had ended, and the cost of his actions had become clear. Oba sought refuge in distant lands, but even there he was not welcomed. "You will never be accepted here," a distant king told him coldly. "You destroyed your own bloodline. You betrayed your people." His empire lay in ruins, and the consequences of his ruthless actions weighed heavily on him. He had betrayed all who had trusted him, and now betrayal had led only to his downfall. Back in the kingdom, Ife worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been broken. She listened to the people, ensuring that no one was left behind. "Together, we will rebuild what was lost," she vowed, and the people, grateful for her leadership, began to trust her completely. The kingdom began to heal, its wounds slowly closing as Ife brought justice and peace to the land. Even those who had once supported Oba began to see Ife's wisdom. "You have shown true leadership," one former supporter admitted. "You lead with strength and fairness." Ife's reputation grew, and even her enemies started to recognize the power of her leadership. She had united a kingdom that had been torn apart by deceit, and now, under her rule, peace and hope spread throughout the land. Ife focused on restoring honor to the kingdom. "We will remember the sacrifices made," she said, "and we will build a future where all are equal." The people, once divided, now stood together, and trust began to grow once again. The dark days of Oba's reign became a distant memory as the kingdom healed and thrived under Ife's leadership. The healing of the land extended beyond laws and power. It reached into the hearts of the people. Ife worked to heal old wounds, calling for unity between the kingdom's tribes and regions. "We are all one people," she said, reaching out to those who had been divided by Oba's cruel reign. Slowly, the kingdom came together, stronger than it had ever been before. The kingdom flourished under Ife's rule, and the people sang her praises. "The true ruler is here," they said, their faith in her unwavering. "We are united now." Ife smiled, knowing that the future was bright. The kingdom, once torn by betrayal and fear, was now restored. The people, filled with hope, knew that their future had never been more secure. The kingdom was reborn, stronger and more united than ever, and under Ife's leadership, it would remain a land of justice, peace, and honor. As Oba wandered through distant lands, far from the kingdom he had once ruled, the weight of his actions began to settle heavily on him. "I thought my strength made me invincible," he muttered to himself. His arrogance and manipulation had once fueled his power, but now he understood that they had been his undoing. His pride had blinded him to the needs of the people, and, in the end, it had cost him everything. The empire he had once controlled had slipped away, and now he was left alone, forgotten by those he had ruled over. Ife, now firmly in control of the kingdom, stood tall as queen, her resolve unshaken. She looked back at her journey, knowing the path had not been easy. "I did not seek power," she recalled. "I sought justice." Her courage had shone through when she confronted Oba, and it had been her loyalty to the people, not deceit, that had won her the throne. The people had seen the truth in her, and they now recognized her as their true leader. Her reign was built not on power, but on fairness and the promise of a better future for all. As Ife spoke to her council, her words carried the weight of a hard-earned truth. "Oba used betrayal as a tool to climb the throne," she said, shaking her head. "But in the end, betrayal destroyed him." She paused for a moment, her voice steady. "No one who rules through lies can ever hold true power. His actions have shown us that. His rule was a falsehood, and it crumbled beneath the weight of his own deceit." Ife called the people together, her voice ringing clear. "A ruler must listen to the people," she declared. "Their voices hold the true power." She believed that true leadership came from serving others, not ruling over them. Her words resonated deeply with the people, and they nodded in agreement, their trust in her unwavering. She had shown them what true loyalty meant: loyalty to the people, to justice, and to honor. "True leadership does not come from force," Ife told her advisors. "It comes from respect." Her rule was not one of fear, as Oba's had been, but one of honor and fairness. She worked tirelessly to rebuild the kingdom, making sure that the abuses of the past would never be repeated. "We will lead with honor, as the ancestors would have wanted," she vowed, determined to create a kingdom where everyone could live with dignity. As Ife led the kingdom into peace, the people reflected on Oba's legacy. "His greed and lies have left nothing but ruin," an elder said, speaking to the next generation. "Let his story be a warning to all who seek power through manipulation." The lessons of Oba's fall were passed down, a cautionary tale of the dangers of exploiting others. The people knew that true leadership came from fairness, not tyranny. Looking over the kingdom, Ife saw the unity that had been restored. Justice, not power, will guide us, she told her people. The kingdom, once divided, was now whole again, strong under her rule. The restoration of justice had healed the wounds that Oba's reign had inflicted. It was clear to all that the kingdom was now a place of fairness where all could thrive. Eve stood before the people, her voice ringing with wisdom. Leadership is not about sitting on a throne, she said. It is about serving the people with honor and respect. The people cheered, understanding that true strength came from caring for others, not from holding power over them. In Ife's leadership, they saw the hope for a future where justice and equality reigned. With Oba's defeat, tyranny came to an end. A king who rules with fear and lies cannot stand for long, one of Ife's advisors remarked. The kingdom, now free from Oba's oppressive reign, knew peace. They had learned the true meaning of leadership, and they would never forget the lessons of justice, fairness, and loyalty. As Ife looked out over the kingdom, she saw a new beginning. "We rise together," she said, leading her people into a new era. The kingdom, once torn by betrayal, now flourished under her reign. The people were united, their hearts full of hope for the future. The mistakes of the past would not be repeated, and the kingdom would remain strong, guided by the principles of loyalty, justice, and honor. The story had come full circle, and the land was at peace once more.